In this video, I'm going to run through the top 5 most common questions that are asked in Boots interviews, and I'm going to help you plan brilliant answers that will get you a job working at Boots. So let's start with a question that comes up in every single Boots interview, and that's simply, what times can you work at Boots? And a lot of people mess up this question and lose the whole interview right at the very start. So I'm going to show you how you can answer this question to maximize your chances of getting them interested in hiring you. So you've got to get in some key ideas. You have to show that you are reliable, that they can rely on you to be there at the times that they need people. They want someone that is flexible. The more flexibility you can show off, the better. And ultimately, you're going to have to show a can-do attitude. When they're asking you about different times, you want to try as hard as you possibly can to say yes and avoid saying outright no's to anything. If you have to say no to a specific thing, you would rather talk about a preference and talk about flexibility, that you could do it every other week, or try and show as much flexibility as you possibly can. The more you say no, the lower your chances are of getting the job. And fundamentally, you have to show that you're committed to this job. If you start saying lots of things that are going to get in the way of you working and give them a big long list of all of the things that are going to get in the way, you are not going to get the job. They would rather avoid you as a candidate because they're just going to anticipate that you're going to be trouble down the road. The other thing that you're going to have to do to be successful is focus on listing the times that they are very interested in staffing. So Boots specifically need extra staff or find it a little bit more difficult to staff certain times. So if you can pick out the key points and list those, that will get their interest. So you're going to have to mention store opening. If you're happy to work earlier in the morning, that's a great time for them. Weekends, also important because the pharmacy is still open on the weekend. So if you're happy to work those times, definitely mention it. If you're happy to work on school holidays, that is something that you should bring up. If you're not happy to work school holidays and would like to have time off in that time, now isn't a great time to bring it up. Don't bring up any times you can't work. Do not volunteer any information that isn't going to help you. If you are also happy to work late openings, that's a good thing. Some of the Boots stores in the UK open as late as perhaps 7 o'clock at night. So check the opening hours for your store and state that you're happy to work in those later time slots. If you're happy to work at short notice, that's another good thing to bring up. And a great phrase to use to kind of catch all of these, if you're extremely flexible, is to say that you are happy to work to meet business needs. That's a great phrase and very reassuring to your interviewer. So if you stick to what's on this slide, you will be successful in this question. And we can move on to another really key question, which is, what do you know about Boots? Obviously, there is no point going to your Boots interview without having done the research of the company. So I'm going to run through how you can answer this question and some key facts that you need to remember to be successful. So when you're asked this question, you want to think about answering it in this way. Start by saying the obvious things that everyone should know about Boots to make sure that you're covering the key ideas. Then move out and talk about some things that only some people would know. Only people who've researched the company would know certain things. Include those like the history. Then move out and drop in 1 or 2 facts that perhaps the interviewer doesn't even know. So if you're teaching the interviewer something new about the company, that shows that you've done really impressive research and they're going to have to score you highly. So let's run through the key facts that you need to remember and say in your interview. So start by talking about Boots as a pharmacy and beauty retailer as their core business. The bulk of their business is based around pharmacy and beauty, but they have other business lines that we'll discuss in a second. You should be familiar with the fact that they were founded in 1849 and you want to memorize that number. They were also founded by a man called John Boot. That's where we get the name Boots from. Remember his name. It is now owned by an American company called Walgreens. There was a big takeover, and Walgreens is a large American pharmacy chain that Boots is now a part of. You should remember that fact. They are headquartered in Nottingham. They've got the Boots estate in Nottingham, which is a huge estate that's their headquarters complex. And they've got a lot of listed famous buildings in that complex. So talk about Boots as a Nottingham-based company. They also have an optician's business that they acquired and have grown. And they also provide hearing care. So there's 2 other key businesses. And you should be familiar with their No. 7 Cosmetics brand, that is their leading cosmetics company within Boots. They have the Boots Advantage card that you need to know inside out. Make sure you spend some time doing your research and reading about the Advantage card, because there's a lot of questions that they ask about that. So know exactly how points are earned, how to get an advantage card, and what those points can be converted into, and be prepared to answer lots of questions about it. You should also know that ibuprofen was discovered by Boots when they had their big research division, very famous, very popular drug that's used very, very regularly, actually discovered by Boots. Drop that in your interview. There is also an employee discount that is available. That's another good fact to remember. And you can link that to your liking of the company, that's something that interests you. And you should do, as a top tip, is to read Walgreen Boots Alliance's Form 10K. This is a filing with the American government that is required of companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange and other stock exchanges in America. And it actually gives you an amazing amount of information about the company. And if you read that, you'll pick up lots of current information about the wider business. And so if you do that, you're going to be super well prepared for your interview. Now that we've run through the key facts, we can move on and look about the questions that involve interacting with customers. Boots often like to ask quite a lot of questions around how you interact with customers. And one of the more challenging questions is, how would you handle a rude and abusive customer? So I've picked this one as one of the more difficult ones that you've got to get right. So 4 things you're going to have to do. Emphasize that you're going to stay calm. Emphasize also that at all times you're going to be a professional. Show that you're going to follow Boots policies by explicitly stating that regardless of the situation, you're always going to follow the policies that the company has given you in your training, and you will do that sympathetically and professionally. And lastly, for any question around a situation that is unpleasant or could get out of control, emphasize the word de-escalation, that your focus is on calming everything down, getting everything under control, and maintaining a happy and pleasant store environment for all customers. Definitely expect a lot of questions around how you interact with customers, and also be prepared that during your interview, you may actually be put onto the shop floor and be watched interacting with customers. So make sure you're also prepared for that. You will get lots of questions about customers, so think about how you can answer those, and we'll look at some other questions around that. The other question that comes up that you absolutely have to be well prepared for is your strengths and weaknesses. You need to have strengths prepared, you need to have weaknesses prepared, and you need to know the way that you answer these questions. So when you're asked about a strength, you want to pick a key strength, something that is a really big strength. You have to supply some evidence. Think about how you can prove that you really do have this strength. Do you have a reference from a previous manager? Do you have some qualifications? Do you have some work experience? Could you give some examples of times you've used that strength? If you can do that, it makes your strength so much more compelling. And the key thing is, when you're choosing your strength, it has to be something that actually improves Boots' business, that is going to make their business better. And I'll give you some ideas about some strengths that you could use in your interview. And when you answer the question, what you want to do is do it in this form. So start by saying, a major strength that I've developed is, say what your strength is. Then say, I can evidence this strength by, supply some sort of evidence or examples that back up that strength, and then do some work for them. Say, this strength will be useful while working at Boots because. Explain exactly why your strength is going to make their business better. If you do that, it makes your strength so much more compelling. Some ideas of things that you could include are customer service experience. If you've ever worked in a customer-facing job, get a reference backing that up, and talk about successful work experience in customer service and how that's helping you to be really effective at Boots. If you're very friendly, that is a good strength. That's going to help you in interacting with customers. If you're proactive, that's a good strength. That's going to be really helpful. Reliability is super important. They want reliable people working for them. And if you have really good product knowledge, if you're, for example, really interested in cosmetics, talk about that, but be prepared to be asked a lot of follow-up questions to check whether you really do have that knowledge. Now we can move on and look at weaknesses. And this is a question that you can blow the whole interview in. So make sure you've planned out your weakness. So you need to make sure that you've chosen a real weakness. So you don't want to say something like, I'm a massive perfectionist. That is not really a weakness. Avoid it. Then you want to make sure that you say what you're actually doing about your weakness. It's not good enough to just say, I have this weakness. You want to talk about what you're doing to improve it. That could be getting some mentoring, could be getting some training, or it could be going on a course or studying something to make you overcome that weakness. But most importantly, you have to choose your weakness to be something that Boots doesn't care about. If you choose something that's important, it will mark you down. So you don't want to say something like, my biggest weakness is my offensive body odor. If you were to say that, you're not going to get the job. So pick something Boots doesn't care about. I'll give you some ideas of weaknesses that you can use that's not going to hurt your score. When you answer the question, you want to say things like, one of the weaknesses I'm aware of is, state the weakness, but don't talk about the weakness so much. Focus on saying, I have been working on this by. What are you doing to overcome the weakness? And then hopefully you'll reassure them that the weakness isn't a big deal and you're going to fix it anyway. Some ideas of things that you could talk about is only being able to speak English, because the vast majority of people applying probably only speak English as well. So it's not going to put you at any major disadvantage. If you're not applying to a management role, delegation is one thing that you can talk about, because you can easily say that in the future you're going to develop this skill before you even consider moving into management. But when you're applying for a job that's entry level, you're not going to need to delegate. So that as a weakness isn't going to be a problem. Speaking in public is a good weakness. You can easily talk about that, and it's easy to overcome because you can plan to do that in the future. And to be honest, you're probably not going to be expected to do much public speaking while you're working in a Boots store. Spelling and maths is also one that you can use if you're applying to an entry-level job. So follow this procedure on the arrow and pick a good weakness that Boots doesn't care about, and you will survive this question. Let's move on and look at a general way of answering questions. So Boots like to ask a lot of questions like, describe a time when you, and they will give various scenarios, and you have to describe a time where you used a particular skill or you interacted with a customer in a particular way. And I'll give you a list of examples that you should be ready to prepare, but I want to actually take you through the basic way that you approach answering any question that says, describe a time when you. And it follows a procedure that's called the STAR method. So it starts with the situation. What actually happened? What was the situation that was this time that you're describing? What was the task? What did you actually have to do? What was the action that you took, and what was the result? So I want to run through a great example of unbelievably good customer service that Steve Wynn, the founder of Wynn Resorts, gives us his example of when his company provided amazing customer service. So the situation was a customer at the hotel had forgotten their medicine. They traveled a very long distance and had completely forgotten their medication and thought they had to go home. The task that the employee had was to find some way to get their medicine to them so that they didn't have to leave and ruin their holiday. The action that this person took was that they organized their medicine to be picked up and delivered the next day. And so the result was the couple were extremely happy and didn't have to cancel their holiday and go home. You see the way that that's been planned out. It starts by saying what the situation was, what did the person have to do to solve the problem, what action did they take, and what was the result. You want to have a really positive result. So think about some examples of some key things. So you need to plan examples for customer service, professionalism, and teamwork. So think about when you provided great customer service, when you've shown professionalism, and when you've worked well in a team. And when you plan out your answer, and I would recommend you actually write these out with the STAR method and memorize it. That means that any of the common questions that Boots ask around describe a time when, you've got a brilliant STAR-based answer for it. And before we finish, as a bonus, here are some great questions that you can ask in your Boots interview. You definitely want to ask them about the next steps. Show that you're really interested. So ask that first question. If you care about working at Boots, you want to actually really show some passion about it and engage in a positive conversation in that. So ask, what is your favorite thing about working at Boots? And share some enthusiasm about that. So if they say some things they really like, talk about how you would really enjoy the same things as your interviewer. You should ask what you can do now to be really well prepared for starting. Show an eagerness to prepare, like you really actually take your job seriously. Another clever question that you can ask is to ask them to describe how they would characterize the perfect Boots employee, because that will let them show you what they are looking for, and you can engage in a conversation around how you meet the requirements of the job and how you meet their view of what a good employee looks like. And the last thing you're going to have to do is make sure you make up one question on the day. You have to be listening to what they're saying and think up one question on the day to show that you're really listening to what they're saying and that it's a two-way conversation. So I hope this video has been very helpful to you, and I wish you the best of luck in your Boots interview. And finally, thank you very much for watching.